Hello and welcome to Politics Today. In this programme today we'll be discussing the importance and the significance of the US midterm elections that are taking place on Tuesday the 6th of November. In this programme I'm joined by Reagan King, pastor, author and activist. And also Mark Sutherland from Creative Hub Productions, our in-house American US elections expert. Mark, I have to ask you first. Many viewers are saying, will think, why are we doing a program on the US midterm elections? Because this is in the United States. This is a British Christian TV program. So the question I'm going to ask is, why are the US midterm elections so important to a Christian audience here in the UK?
If we look at American politics, if we go back to the history, particularly from the Second World War, we have to conclude that the importance of what is happening in America is profound, and that it does actually affect us. And the evidence being, if we go back even to the formation of the Marshall Plan and the formation of being part of various things in regard to the European Union and contacts there, relationships with JFK and all the rest. If people do their history, they will find that out. And if we go back, as an example, to Suez, we were asked to get out because we'd upset the Americans and their policy, and we didn't inform them of that. Why am I saying that? The President of the United States is always seen as the leader of the free world. That's it, period. So that is why we must pay very, very close attention to what's going on, and we must be in prayer about this. And for me personally, the way I read it, and having just had the privilege to come back from the States, being over in Montana for a week, and on the ground and hearing various people's opinion, the fact is that this is the re-election of the 45th President of the United States. And that is just not my words. If we look at Mr. Steve Bannon in recent interviews actually underlining that. And we see the recent political shenanigans that have gone on, say with Brett Kavanaugh, etc. That undermines this. This is a massive spiritual battle that is coming out, exercising in this political fight that we see what is going on.
And Reagan, as a native American, can you explain to us the importance and significance of the midterm elections? Because they're held every 2 years, aren't they? And this is a chance for the American electorate to see which political party will either dominate Congress or the Senate.
What we're talking about here is of great legislative significance. In Congress, made up of the House of Representatives and Senate, you have the power to make laws, and they will push those laws to the president, who can then either veto or can accept those laws. If there's any challenge of that, the Supreme Court can pick it up and can evaluate whether the law is constitutional or not. So it's extremely important for ourselves in the UK to actually understand the special relationship that the US has with the UK as a first off point of importance, but then following on from that, the impact legislature in the United States can have and does have on our own political system here in the UK. There's a great deal of influence, decisions made in the Congress, which is actually being voted on in these midterm elections. A great deal of influence that can then have following the president's approval, following any evaluation by the Supreme Court on our own parliamentary process and procedure here in this country.
Let's have a look now at this report that shows us all about the US midterm elections that are taking place on Tuesday, the 6th of November.
Chances are you've already seen campaign ads, bumper stickers, and yard signs of your local congressmen and congresswomen. Yep, the midterm election season is upon us once again. If you didn't know, they're kind of a big deal. 435 seats in the House of Representatives, 35 of the 100 seats in the Senate, 36 of 50 governorships, not to mention numerous statewide races and ballot measures up for vote. Unless you're a political junkie, it's quite difficult to keep track. So why are midterms so important? And what do we expect in 2018? We have the facts. Civics 101. Midterm elections are generally viewed as a gauge of the sitting president's performance. The House of Representatives and 1/3 of the Senate is elected every 2 years. All senators serve 6-year terms. Midterm elections can shift the power of the presidency. The year was 1994. It was the first midterm election of Bill Clinton's presidency. Dubbed the Republican Revolution, the GOP captured the U.S. House, Senate, and a majority of the country's governor's mansions. In fact, it was the first time Republicans controlled both chambers of Congress since 1952. This sweep led to major policy changes, including welfare reform. Jump to the thumping of 2006, President George W. Bush's second midterm.
If you look at race by race, it was close. The cumulative effect, however, was not too close. It was a thumping.
Democrats won back both chambers handily from the GOP. Then, President Barack Obama was elected 2 years later, and Democrats reformed the healthcare system.
Elections are hard to win, and it's hard to flip seats. People favor their incumbents. They might not like Congress, but they tend to like the person that is representing them because they know that name, they might see them in the community.
In the world of 2018, Democrats stand a chance to capture the House, but their road to a majority in the Senate is much tougher. Political analysts say momentum is tipping toward Democrats, but they also have to defend more than 24 Senate seats this time around, including 10 in states President Trump won in 2016.
To flip the House, Democrats need 23 seats. That's a lot of people to flip, even if some of those margins are slimmer. There's a really tough map for Democrats.
In the Senate, not only does control matter, but the size of the majority matters. Many votes require 3/5 majority, or 60 votes, to skirt a filibuster, and some require a 2/3 majority. On a state level, leaders elected this fall will influence redistricting after the 2020 U.S. Census. You may have heard of the dreaded gerrymander. The party in control will have the opportunity to redraw district lines that tip future elections in their favor. Despite all the important issues and candidates up for date, voter turnout during midterm elections is substantially lower than presidential elections. Approximately 40% of the eligible voting populace voted in recent elections. Compare that with about 60% during the presidential election years.
Average voters are excited to come out and vote for the presidential election. They might be less excited to vote for their more local races.
The midterms are so influential. Beyond trying to keep the government running, Congress is unlikely to consider any major legislation for the rest of the year. That means all those fights over immigration, healthcare, and the economy will end up being decided by those who are elected.
And that goes a long way in explaining the process of the US midterm elections taking place next month. Mark, if we look at the opinion polls, and what's so interesting about opinion polls in recent years is that they've got it wrong. But if we look at the current opinion polls, it looks like the Democrats are ahead. It looks unlikely that they will actually win the Senate. But if they are right, they could actually win Congress. What are the implications for Christians, for President Trump and his administration, if the Democrats win Congress?
Interestingly, we were here in 2016 in regard to the presidential race, and according to the polls, then Hillary Rodham Clinton would have absolutely trounced it and would have been in the White House. Well, I don't know about you, but that hasn't happened. And actually, we see the polls, and the polls were wrong. So I personally would rather do the original thing, which is to actually speak to people on the ground and speak to people that are attending the rallies and that are part of what's going on. And I have then the privilege to do that. So if you say what are the implications for, say, for the president, according to Maxine Waters, who just shouts as hard as she can that it's about impeaching 45, impeaching the 45th president of the United States. On what? The whole construct of creating Mueller and the Russian hoax, and it is a hoax, I will just publicly say that and ask people to go and do some investigation. And the reason being is to take the whole attention off themselves, off the corruption from people, from Brennan, Comey and Uncle Tom Cobley and all, of what has actually been going on. And people then say to me, well, what are you actually going on about? What I'm going on about is the people that have worked extremely hard to undermine the Constitution of the United States of America. And one of the big problems is, of course, that civics hasn't been taught in schools properly since 1973. So coming back, the implications are this, is that the Democratic Party, with massive members of them being part of the Democratic Socialists of America, and the clue is in the second word, which has no standing within the American Constitution whatsoever if you are if you are going for liberty. That is what this is about. They will impeach, they will go for impeaching the president because they would much rather burn down their equivalent of the Reichstag, which is the White House, than actually allow the American people to participate politically within their rights and actually vote and say, no, we want the Constitution to be put forward. And just to say that voter turnout to put President 45 in was huge. And I urge people to get out and vote in regard to these midterms.
And Reagan, I would like your comments really, particularly on Dr. James Dobson, founder of and president of Family Talk, and this is what he said about the midterm elections. He said, "We must vote, vote, vote to elect our leaders who will defend what has been purchased with the blood of the patriots who died to protect our liberty." Knowing how far the Democrats have turned to the left, what are the implications for Christians in America if the Democrats win both houses?
What we could see is an overturning of recent moves towards laws that value life, particularly life of the unborn child. We could also see some healthcare reforms, which inarguably healthcare reform needs to happen, but at the same time, the healthcare reforms the Democrats would be in favor of would once more threaten many people. Already under Obamacare, many ordinary American citizens have lost out and have themselves been crippled financially, whereas previously they were not. So were there to be a shift back towards a Democratic majority in any of the houses, we could see a lot of the progress made and some of those spheres taken away.
And Mark, we look at US politics, it very much reflects our own politics as well, in which the divisions are so big. If President Trump is able to keep his majority in both houses, both in the Senate and the Congress, which means he can go ahead with his pro-Christian legislative agenda, do you think he'll be in a position then to start to heal some of the wounds of America? And will this now give the Democrats time to rethink and do some soul searching in terms of the far left policies that they're actually pursuing?
There is no doubt about it, the Democrats have moved to the left in an extreme, and having just come back from the States, there's an interesting word that is constantly going around, which is called communism. They are facing that. We want to go to that kind of extreme. Instead of actually then looking back in the past of what they actually represent. And that's why there's been this massive movement of walk away, of traditional people that have voted for the Democratic Party are walking away in droves of all different backgrounds, but they are true American patriots who have realised that this party wants to take them into such a far left-wing socialist communist construct. So they are going to have to think about that, because it goes against what fundamentally America is about in regard to the Constitution, etc. So maybe there will be some soul searching. And if Hillary Rodham Clinton wants to rerun in 2020, then she has handed to the Republican Party a gift horse. Because by then, and there is 2 years to go, that even more evidence will come out about what has been going on for many, many years, to even going back to LBJ, and the undermining of the Constitution. And yes, I keep going on about that, and yes, I'm learning as fast as I can what this really means, Simon. We do not understand how a representative republic in this country actually works. We don't understand that. And having ourselves gone into regard to the tyranny of the European Union, and being under a socialist construct where we can't even vote out these 26 commissioners. You could turn around and say that that is what the Democratic Party want. It's about power, it's about having big government, centralisation, and dictating to the American people what they should be thinking, what they should be doing, and how they should be conducting their lives, which goes totally against pursuing happiness and pursuing liberty and not having big government interfere in their lives in the United States of America. That is fundamentally what it is, Simon. They are fighting for the soul of their country. That is it. And if you are passionate about that, I am, and you understand, beginning to understand that, you see that manifesting this, and we come back to this, we are engaged in the biggest spiritual battle of our lives on both sides of the Atlantic, and we see that manifesting in the political realm.
Yeah, and Regan, we see in, whether it's in Canada, whether it's in our own country here in Britain or across Europe and across other Western nations, this very anti-Christian legislation really being drawn up by governments around the world. If President Trump is able to win, and let's pray that he does win and maintain a majority in both houses, do you think that will slow that process down in terms of legislating anti-Christian laws?
Well, the scriptures, looking at it from a biblical standpoint, are clear. We are going to be facing difficulties and trials. Jesus was very clear that we would be hated, and that when we are hated, we should remember that the world hated him first. So opposition, hatred, persecution, we should expect. In terms of whether or not we'll be slowed down, who can actually say? We would love to see there be laws, legislature that protects the core elements of what we believe concerning human identity. We see that particularly under attack these days with transgender ideology seeping in and being enforced and celebrated, and with people coming under attack who do not celebrate it. That's a real concern, and we would hope that the people who fill this new Congress will be able to defend the identity that we were created with, male and female, in God's image. At the same time, we also have to be very careful that we recognize our hope and our salvation and our progress cannot be found and is not found in any one person or in any particular group of people. So while Trump has seen some good things, we are constantly reminded of his fallible humanity, and we as Christians have to be aware of the particular ways in which we ourselves engage with others, how we promote and how we support political endeavors, that we do so with the mind that actually at the end of the day, whether Trump, whether the Republican Party or any other party is victorious on this earth or not, Christ is ultimately victorious, and his kingdom is not of this earth.
Absolutely. And Mark, when it comes down to the US congressional elections, we're seeing that, for example, the former presidential candidate, Ted Cruz from Texas, is losing in the polls. How much will be a big blow if we see, for example, Christian senators and Christian congressmen lose their seats to the Democrats?
Of course it's a blow. But what's fascinating is that we have to look at why. You then have to understand the politics of the state of California, or the Socialist Republic of the state of California, frankly. And it has to be said, this is what's going, and people move, and when people move, they take their ideology with them. So if they're moving to Texas, which they are, if they're moving up to the state of Montana with those ideals, which they are, then this is going to be a fight. Yes, that is what is going on. I hope that Ted Cruz, my prayer is that he does not, according to the polls, and frankly, I don't believe them. We don't believe them. And as dear friends of mine who live in Houston, let's just say this. There was a huge rally last night. They couldn't, the particular evening, they couldn't attend in the end because of all the traffic jams. And you're looking at a rally where a particular venue would hold 48,000 people because the president is coming in. Now, don't tell me that people are not fired up, are not passionate about what's going on, and they need to pull their fingers out and make sure they're down the voting booths to make sure that this doesn't happen. And just quickly, we know what the press again are doing. There's a massive psyop here which says Mr. Cruz is losing, this person is losing, you know, etc., which means that you do not have to come out and vote. That's exactly the same thing, Simon, that happened in the presidential election of 2016. That psyop is happening again. And I can assure you that I am convinced that the true patriots of that country, of the United States of America, will not fall for it, no matter what various social media providers are doing whatever they can to either take conservative voices down, to make sure that those voices are not heard. There are other means to do that. So I don't believe the polls at all.
Good. Well, we'll wait and see, won't we? And Reagan. Now, if we look at the recent political battle involving Kavanaugh for that seat on the Supreme Court, do you think because that battle was so fierce that we're now going to see what is traditionally a low turnout for the midterm elections prove to be a big turnout for the elections, and that this will mobilise the Republican support base to come out and back President Trump?
I think you could actually see the situation go either way. What we had with the Kavanaugh situation is an internal fight against President Trump's selected Supreme Court justice, with many people siding alongside Kavanaugh. You actually are going to now have people going along to the elections who are wanting to show their support, wanting to ensure that the justice system is headed in a positive direction. At the same time, there were many people outside of the legislature who continue to oppose Kavanaugh, who believe the allegations against him and are going to go out and vote, whereas perhaps previously they couldn't care less about it. So I do think we have to be understanding that it could go either way. Traditionally, the non-presidential party has been strong in the midterm elections. Again, we can't really trust the polls. The polls are consistently wrong. If we even look in this country, they've been wrong in so many cases recently. So if we actually look at the polling, we're probably going to get it wrong. I'm hopeful that we could see a positive shift continuing towards more conservative, family-friendly, and God-honoring values. At the same time, it could very well swing the other way.
Absolutely. And also, Mark, it's interesting to know, we've got to realise this, that it's not New York, it's not Los Angeles, it's not Miami that decides who wins elections. It's the American heartland. And knowing that the American heartland have a very strong biblical outlook on the world, will they come out and vote? And do they realise what's at stake in this midterm elections?
My prayer is that they do come out and vote. I mean, it's the biggest insult, you know, when you say the flyover states. What a big insult. We just fly over them and then we ignore them. And you raise a very, very good point. Just quickly about Brett Kavanaugh, I'd like to say this. That man they said, you are guilty, and now we've got to prove you innocent. That's why that was so important, and the behaviour that came out was just appalling and just disgusting, as far as I'm concerned. But people have got to come out and vote, and as I said publicly a few days ago in the States, it isn't people outside who care passionately about what's going on in the world and for their liberties, and more importantly, for us as Christians and the values that we hold that are down to the Bible. We are looking in. We are looking to them because they do steer policy, Simon. We cannot, that should not be denied. Over here, the intellectual elite like to go, oh, we can forget about America. Oh, what a bunch of, forget that. We don't understand it. Well, we need to understand it and understand it big time. All I can say is I'm doing what I can to say, get out and vote. And I think they will come out, and people are doing whatever they can to actually make sure that that happens. There is no room whatsoever for complacency. There really isn't. And I have discussed that previously. I've discussed that previously with you, which says just because, and it isn't about Donald Trump as a person per se. It's about the movement that he actually represents. And as I said before, people haven't voted for a priest and, or a vicar and a minister and put him in the White House. Of course not. You're not perfect, and I'm certainly not. None of us are. But he is passionate about his country and representing his country, and he can see what has been going on, right? But also, as Reagan has said quite rightly, we have biblical prophecy. Now we get into an interesting area. We have things unfolding, and there is God's hand and moving events. And quite rightly, we are seeing events unfold that affect Israel, etc., etc. Who would have believed that you would have a president in the United States who's going, I'm now going to move our embassy to Jerusalem? This is on a biblical clock and a biblical timeline.
Yep. And Reagan, we're down to 2 minutes of the programme. So in terms of our viewers watching this programme, can you advise them about how they should pray for the forthcoming midterm elections?
Pray as Scripture tells us that God's will would be done and that his kingdom would be furthered, whatever the outcome. Pray that Christians would be faithful to vote not according to emotions or feelings, but according to conscience and according to what is right and good for society. The Scriptures say righteousness exalts a nation, but sin is a reproach for any people. And blessed is the nation whose God is the Lord. While there is a distinction and separation between church and state, those principles should guide the legislature and who we seek to put there.
And in 30 seconds, Mark, why are these elections so important? Remind us again for the US and for our freedom and our liberty here in the UK.
Bottom line is that the West, the whole of the West, what we represent, to me, our Judeo-Christian heritage is at stake. And it's as simple as that.
Mark, also, Reagan, thank you so much for being my guest on Politics Today. And I just want to thank you for watching this programme. We covered the US midterm elections that are taking place on Tuesday, the 6th of November. We need to be praying because what happens in the States happens here. And if our freedoms and liberties are curtailed in the States, they will be curtailed here. That's why it's important that we should pray and uphold those righteous political candidates standing in the midterm elections, and that's why it's so important and significant. So thank you for watching Politics Today.